Final Stop Brazil. Book 2, Life After Hell. Chapter 38. A Cell for Me, Including Cockroaches. 27th of October, 2008. I managed to call Michael a second time, but my worries about him only increased. He told me that he and his girlfriend were no longer together. He had called her a whore, which I found very shocking. But to make matters worse, he had choked her in a dispute. The old aggressions. I still could not get concrete information of him where he was staying, only that he was with friends in Hamburg, Farmton. During the call he was trying to make me believe that he had signed a working contract with Telecom. As a miner? It sounded all good, but I believed nothing of it. Before I could tell him that I love him very much, the line was dead. I had used up my credit. Lena offered me to introduce me to her lawyer. First, I phoned him. Then I talked to him personally. The conversation was very positive and raised new hope. Dr. Amadeus was convinced that I should have been released long ago. He was ready to take my case and apply for habeas corpus to obtain my release. However, he wanted 3,000 reais immediately. Lena and I were trying to negotiate with him that I would give him 2,000 reais now and the rest later. It was already clear that for me was no money left anymore, because by the time I asked Wesley to make the bill, I expected him to make it expensive. But anyway, if I continued to let myself be represented by Wesley, it would take forever and I probably would lose my money. Dr. Amadeus couldn't look into my process because it was submitted to the Ministério Público for the decision in the second instance about semi-aberto and conditional. This he promised to do in the following week, to have then a further conversation with me. Of course I was suspicious, because up until now I was just disappointed. On the other hand, he seemed much more competent than Wesley. When I let him know that I planned to stay in Brazil, he offered me his help. Maybe there was still hope of a normal life afterwards. The situation in the cell was unbearable. Hilda and I were not fighting, but her depression was drawing me down as well. Her presence cut almost the air I was breathing. Since I needed every penny for Dr. Amadeus, I could forget to go to PE. I had to keep working, even though it was hard for me. Since 1 week, it had become even worse with Hilda. She could not speak properly, and not move her hand. Paralysis. She felt nothing, neither in her mouth nor in her hand. After I finally told the guard on Saturday what was wrong with her, she was taken into Saúde. They examined her blood pressure, and it was diagnosed that she was very nervous and depressed. She got tranquilizers. For me, the symptoms were, however, very clear. Hilda was suffering from paralysis, if not a slight stroke. But I am neither a doctor nor a psychologist, but was of the opinion that it was partly her own fault. Constantly staring at the wall and ponder made her body and her head become ill. I couldn't do anything for her, because I needed all the strength not to despair myself. 4th of November, 2008. Dr. Amadeus had visited me, as promised a week ago, but he said he could do nothing more for me because Wesley had done a good job. The decision on semi-aberto was shortly before the announcement, and the judge had already agreed. Only the prosecutor wanted a confirmation from the Polícia Federal that there was no deportation order in my sentence. Dr. Amadeus gave me in detail exactly what were now the next necessary steps Wesley needed to make. Suddenly he asked why I had been on hunger strike. He could only know this if he had really studied my file. In any case, he was very confident that I would spend Christmas in freedom, as well as Lena, and began to sing loudly Jingle Bells, whereupon Lena and I had to laugh. It would be too good to be true, but I remembered the past year. Same time, same hope. Saturday, I called Wesley to explain to him what he had to do next. He, however, barely listened, fell into my words, and alleged that the judge had not decided anything yet. Clearly, he was not in the picture, because he did not overlook my process. Instead, he only waited. Before I could let my anger run wild, Wesley's credit was finished, and thus our conversation. Whenever I called Wesley, I did it with our calls. But at least on Sunday, I had a slightly more enjoyable phone conversation with Michael. He was adamant not to return to the residential group, although he was threatened with the police, but he wanted to keep his job at the telecom, where he was doing data entry, even though it was one of those mini-jobs. But Michael seemed to have very clear plans. He also told me about a new girlfriend, this time a girl from Peru. His hair he wanted to grow again. Also, he said he would stop smoking. I was very happy to hear all this. He had described in the last phone calls that he was having a Mohican haircut, shaved bald on the sides, and only on his head a strip of hair, which I thought was absolutely ugly. With his asthma, it worried me even more that he was smoking at all. And he was very understanding that he had to get his aggression under control, and certainly not become violent against girls, after I advised him that he could quickly run into trouble with his attitude. What worried me, however, was the fact that he didn't want to give me an address where I could send letters to. Michael suggested I send letters to his sister, but of this I wanted to know nothing. Again I indicated that I wished he would come to me. At least he conceded that he would surely be visiting me. But that would probably be a long time yet. This time I even had time to tell him how happy I was to be talking to him after so long. He too was very happy about it, he said. However, I let him know that I risked life and limb because if I was caught making telephone calls, I would not only go to Castigo, but risk all beneficiaries. All in all, this had been a positive conversation which really did me very good. Unfortunately, the 14 minutes were much too short, but Michael promised to buy a phone card to call me. Happy and relieved, I returned to my cell, which I had for myself since the last Thursday. Hilda had been admitted to a hospital outside the prison. It seemed quite serious with her. Lena let me know that it was probably a stroke, as I had suspected. I wished her that she soon felt better, but I enjoyed the time for me alone in the cell. I returned to listen to my music, when and how loud I wanted to, sang and danced sometimes, and the volume of the TV I adjusted so that when I watched something I could also hear it. Since a long time, I felt relaxed. The only problem which had stopped me from staying alone in the cell before were the cockroaches. Those beasts unleashed a terrible panic in me, especially since I could not even kill them. I was simply not capable of doing this. If others did this for me, I shook myself in disgust. In my time with Donna Edith, it was her doing it for me, always amused about my hysteria, especially during summertime, when those huge flying cockroaches were blowing to attack. So I had now some battles to be fought, alone in the cell, especially in the evenings after inclusion, because then I was really alone with these horror creatures. The same Thursday, when Hilda had been taken to hospital, I got company by one of them. At the sight of it, I jumped hysterical onto Hilda's bed, thinking about drowning the thing, picked up the full bucket of water, but changed my mind, deciding not to put the entire cell under water. So I grabbed the broomstick and pushed the beast at first into the bathroom. To keep it there, I used my lower mattress as a barrier, without knowing how to continue. It made me nervous that I couldn't see the beast anymore. Finally, I had to go to the bathroom and lifted the barrier where the cockroach was hiding underneath. Startled, I screamed aloud, whereupon the cockroach, probably just as scared, fled under the bed, where we kept all our stuff. Again I grabbed the broom and threw my enemy now in the other direction. It took refuge under my sandals, and I back on top of the bed. Loudly I was swearing at the intruder and threw my sneakers at the sandals. It didn't move. I was in despair. Mostly I was annoyed with myself for forgetting to close up the gap under the door, with an old towel, so it was my own fault to be having this bad luck. I was about to call the guards, but decided not to do it, because I knew already they would not open my door, and certainly not kill a cockroach for me. Instead, I took a tranquilizer, shifted my mattress on Hilda's bed, sat initially a little puzzled about, until the calmanchi began work, and I didn't give a shit about anything anymore. To my enemy I said, "You can do now what you want. Go dance on my quilt if you wish. I go to sleep now." Just like on command, the beast came from under my sandals, and I could hardly believe it. Flat out the same way as did I come into the cell. Probably the cockroach was pissed off the same as me to be thrown from one corner to another. Thus, at least I still had a few hours to sleep in peace. When I told Lena about my nightly visit, she wanted to die laughing about it. But I made sure it didn't happen again. Every night I sealed the space under the door. Despite the fact that another year was over again, I felt quite okay at this moment. I was supplied with my purchase, so did not have to starve. Possessed nearly 1,500 reais on my account, and on the savings account 800 reais. The prospect of semi-aberto, and currently had my peace. The only dark spot was the nerve inflammation in my right arm I suffered from since a few days. It was the result of the monotonic movement at work and the permanent overload of my hand by writing. Because long before I had decided to write my book all over again, even though I found it very hard, to relive the happy moments of my life, as well as this never-ending nightmare, which had destroyed everything. But I never heard from Rosie again. Michael had never called her. He allegedly did not reach her, and thus I would have lost my book forever. All work for nothing. But that I didn't want, under no circumstance. Michael should eventually read this book one day to learn to understand his mother, and not just him. What happened to me was for the public to know. So I swallowed all sorts of painkillers, but it didn't help. The doctor in Saud prescribed me pills, which were not issued in the jail pharmacy, of course. Instead, I received rub ointment and replacement pills for muscle inflammation. I just hoped they had an effect, for especially if I didn't move my arm, I felt the pain badly.